Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars, and today we're going to be doing the complete guide for Malphasie. Now, as many of you may know, Malphasie recently got a massive overhaul to her kit. She's now... There's no other word to describe her other than ridiculously cool, okay? She went from pretty cool to extremely cool, pretty much just overnight. And there's kind of a lot to unpack, and a lot of people are still kind of unsure of how best to make use of Malphasie, so hopefully this guide can help you get started. So the first thing I do want to dive into is kind of her kit and what she does, because it did change a lot of things. Now, you'll notice she does have a lot of the same sorts of stuff that she had before, like her Divine Ruination skills with Menacing and Flying Strike right here. Oh, I can't really... Hard to gesture to it. Right there. And then she also has Aerial Dive and Tenebrous Dive. That's hard to say. And those abilities are super handy because they're bolting strike frames now, which is a change, and they also imperil and imbue their respective elements. So if you want to add dark elements to your attack, you can do Tenebrous. If you want to add wind, do Aerial Dive. Either way, those are really handy opening skills. Thousand Wings is basically the same that it was, except with more damage, and same with Turbulence and Fiendish Winds. Those abilities are all pretty much the same, where they do AoE damage. Thousand Wings can upgrade to Thousand Wings Plus, and it's non-elemental, whereas Fiendish Winds and Turbulence are both Aureal Ray Chaining family skills that have their innate element attached. Now, her cooldown skills are pretty much the same as they were before. I think Intense Rancor, I don't even know if it had a potency buff, but it basically does, the same thing that it did before. So those are pretty much the same. Turmoil is a new skill that Malphasie received. This is one of her stronger non-unlocked skills. So this one you can use at all times, and it is pretty strong. Now, one of the things that has made her kit incredibly potent is Aggressive Flock, which is an innate dual cast ability that allows her to do a ton of awesome things. So as you can see, she can multicast all of her abilities, which is ridiculous. So this means, and you saw a number of these featured in the Tour of Destruction video, where, for example, against Odin, I was able to combine a big break with Birds of a Feather with some damage from Turmoil, for example. Also multicast Intense Rancor to buff damage, and then imbued and imperiled with like Aerial Dive or Tenebrous Dive, or using Feast of Crows with a chaining skill in order to mitigate damage and then deal damage. There's so many combos that you can do. But if you're looking to do damage, I think the sort of rotation or combo that I typically fall into is to imbue whatever element is the best choice, and then to do Turmoil, because that's probably going to give you your best damage, and with a little bit of LB support, you can usually get Malphasie's LB pretty quickly. Oopsie doopsie. I do that a lot because I always go for those spark chains manually. Sometimes I screw it up. Now that's really flashy. That's very cool. So that's how you kind of get started. Malphasie's Limit Burst was upgraded, which is a big deal. So now that she's imbued with wind, you do want to get her LB up ASAP. Now there's two ways to do that. You can either entrust and just fill it manually, or natively, or you can use Birds of a Feather. This fills everybody's LBs, and a nice combo that you can do is to AoE LB fill, and it also breaks Defense and Spirit, which is very, very nice. And then combo that with your imbue and imperil. That way you're going to get a ton of LB for the rest of your party and for Malphasie herself, and you're going to be prepped to go on damage. And you can see it still does some pretty decent damage. Now, there's a particular reason that combo is very, very strong, because it means Malphasie's going to have her Limit Burst right away, and we're just going to go ahead and show what that looks like, because it does chain now. It didn't used to chain before. It was basically only 3 hits, I think, or maybe 4, but now it chains with Stardust Ray, so this is great, and it unlocks her 2 best abilities. So yeah, that's way better than it used to be. So one of the things that makes Malphasie's opening combo so strong with aggressive flock, multicast with Birds of a Feather, which fills Limit Burst and breaks defense and spirit, and her Imbue Imperil, is that LB fill goes to the entire party, which means you can use CG Charlotte's Limit Burst on turn 1. It gets it really, really close. It doesn't fill it all the way, but if you use someone like Mira to Entrust and then do an intro for the party, boom, boom, Charlotte's LB is ready to go, and then on turn 1 you can have that extremely powerful Limit Burst available. So that's a combo that I highly recommend when you're using Malphasie, is that you use that Birds of a Feather so you get that LB fill for the rest of your party, and then many people are using Charlotte now. That lets you get her Limit Burst on turn 1. And even if you can't entrust with somebody, it's pretty common for Malphasie's chaining to generate enough crystals because it gets Charlotte's Limit Burst very, very close to completely full. So, aside from that, Malphasie's most powerful skills are Ruckus Storm and Soaring Shadows. And both of these are innately their own element, so they're innately wind or innately dark, so you don't have to spend time imbuing or imperiling, but the nice thing about setting up with the imbue imperil on the wind is that you do have the imperil up to deal additional damage. So this is her best wind ability. As you can see, it does like a lot more damage. It does a stupid amount of damage. Yeah, that put me at my new highest. I don't spend a lot of time in here. I really don't. I'd rather just like spend time against trials. But oh, did it fall off? See, whenever you lose her good abilities, you just use those LBs again, get them going. And that's about all there is to it. Now, Malphasie is a true dual wield damage dealer, which means that she received the 6 times chain modifier increase, which is a huge buff to her power, and she also has the 200% true dual wield equip expansion or addition, I guess you would call it. So she does build true dual wield for hybrid, and we can go ahead and get into that in a second, how the best way to build that is, but I wanted to show off Soaring Shadows because this is her other best move, which looks very, very cool. So all in all, that's kind of how you use Malphasie. She brings a lot to the table in terms of AoE damage. Like, her AoE damage is ridiculous because all of her skills hit pretty much everyone. I don't know if she has any single target skills. And then the other combo that I would point out is, before we move on, is Feast for Crows, because this buffs her damage mitigation by like 75%. It's huge, and it buffs her own attack and magic. So this is really handy if you're about to go into, a phase change, or there's just, a turn count, the boss is going to come hit you with something big. You can combo that with any of her other abilities. So if you're like, oh, I want to use that with something else, you totally can. That way she's all but guaranteed to survive because it's a crazy amount of mitigation. Now, one other thing I wasn't too sure about, because I hadn't actually tried it myself, was I was pretty sure you could... Let's test it right now, because Intense Rancor is a very strong ability. Actually, I don't know if it's as high of a modifier as like her chaining, her like Ruckus Storm or Soaring Shadows. It is a lower modifier, but it should do more damage if you finish with it, and I don't know if you can, so let's find out. Oh yeah, the timing was way off on that, so, might not be possible, but something to play around with. So with that, let's go ahead and jump over to the builds, take a look at some suggestions of how you can build your Malphasie. Alright, so the first build that we're looking at is basically the Super Omega Whale build, and there are so many variations on this. Honestly, I think going into depth on whale builds is kind of silly because most people can't even dream of them, even myself. So if I can't do it, most people can't do it. You kind of use what you have. So we'll kind of just gloss over this one, but once you reach a high enough percentage of magic or attack, true dual wield stuff, you can kind of start using non-optimal items such as the High Seraph's Dagger. The High Seraph's Dagger is High Seraph Ultima's STMR that gives a super high flat attack and magic, and that's why it's going to be best in slot for the highest tier of builds. And of course, as most would expect, using 2 Raven Hearts is probably the go-to build for Malphasies, or for Malphasie owners who happen to have 2. Now, let's assume that you're a normal person who doesn't have all of this stuff. Malphasie can be built to be very, very strong even without all of that stuff. This particular build, I don't believe it even uses 5-star base TMRs. This is actually, and what I found out is that even if you're using 5-star base TMRs, you can actually get, you can get very similar amounts of damage. So 4 and 5-star base TMRs can yield you similar results. You'll see stuff like the Stardust Rod, which is the Orthos and Typhon trial reward, as well as Shiva's Tiara, which is another trial reward. The Nutkin Hairpin, which is a 4-star base TMR. Adventure 5, Chocobo Adventure, which is a free one. Rod Mastery, which is free. So there's a lot of options out there for people who don't have, you know, crazy endgame stuff. Just take some good hybrid stuff like Malphasie's TMR or a strong rod and just run that through Item World. Get some attack and magic on it, which that brings me to a question that a lot of people are going to be asking. They say, well, do you build Malphasie more attack or more magic? Honestly, the only solution for you to get the best build for Malphasie is to plug your equipment into the FFBE equip website, which is the website that I use to generate these builds. So that's pretty much your only way to find out the best equipment setup for your particular Malphasie. In general, you know, it's an old adage that people would say, like, oh, build as much of one stat as you can and none of the other. But that's not really true anymore, especially with the number of hybrid options that we have out there. Sometimes it is true that you do want a lot more of one stat than the other, but most of the time you want as much of both stats as possible. So again, plug your equipment into FFBE equip and let it run for you. And it does take a while to calculate hybrid damage because there are so many factors for it. But if you put all your parameters in, put your items in, it'll tell you rather than having to figure it out, you know, what the best setup is for you. So with that, let's talk real quick about whether or not Malphasie is a worth it character. I think as a character, Malphasie is very, very strong and she offers a lot of promise. She covers a couple of elements really, really well that we don't have super great coverage of right now with Wind and Dark. That being said, Wind and Dark are not super favored, but at the same time, you know, you have units like Sylvie who can externally imbue so that, you know, you have other elemental options as well. So in terms of her overall power, she is among the strongest characters in the game, though she is not the strongest in terms of damage at this point in time. She does benefit from the new True Dual Wield upgrades, so she's going to keep astride of, you know, other damage dealers as they come out. I think Malphasie's biggest draw, of course, is going to be her STMR, because that thing is ridiculous. 50% attack and magic, true dual wield with 20% attack and magic, with some flat attack and magic, with demon and bird killer for magic and physical damage. It is probably the most absurdly powerful STMR in the game. I cannot think of another one that gives you more in a single slot. It really is absurd. Now, does that mean that it's worth UOCing or any of that stuff? For most people, absolutely not. I know I did it in the other day's video, but you know what? I do what I want. I've been sitting on so many UOCs that I was like, yeah, hell yeah, this STMR is crazy good. And the thing that most people don't think about is like, yeah, it's good for hybrids, and many people think, yeah, it's good for physical damage dealers too. I can skip CG Barts, you know, because I'll have true dual wield accessories. Well, it's also going to be amazing on mages when we get an upgrade to the true dual wield cap for them, because right now mages are capped out at 100% true dual wield, but that won't always be the case. Eventually they'll get 200% just like everyone else, and everyone will have 200% true dual wield for everything as a cap. So for now, it's okay for mages, but later it's going to be extremely good for mages. It's probably going to be best in slot for many mages, because, you know, there's a lot of true double hand stuff out there that people use for mages, but this is another option for true dual wield if that happens to be the equipment that you have. So that being said, that wraps up our complete guide for Malphasie. Let me know what you think of Malphasie's adjustments down in the comments below, and I'll see everybody in the next video.